Welcome to Practical Access. I'm Lisa Dieker.
And I'm Rebecca Hines. And Lisa, I'm so excited about today's guest because the topic is one that is so precise and so under-talked about. Who do we have?
Yeah, so we're excited to have with us today and welcome Dr. Honora Wall, who is a speaker, author, teacher, and trainer in a topic that we have to all practice saying, which is dyscalculia. For those who, and again, we hear it in lots of different ways, but it's really math disabilities in short. So welcome, Dr. Honora Wall, and excited to have you with us.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here. I love talking about this. So it's such an important topic. Thanks for bringing awareness.
Yeah. So I'm going to kick it off with the first question. I happen to be a parent of a kid with a disability and has Tourette's and dyslexia. This is one that we didn't have in our bucket, but oftentimes the literacy piece gets in the way of the math piece. And so help us understand the difference in kids who have language-based problems versus who have math problems, and how many teachers think about that in their teaching, especially in math.
Yeah, it's such an interesting trajectory. So both dyslexia and dyscalculia came about in the research in the same time, about the 1930s, but reading really took off as a national interest where math did not. So a lot of teachers feel like this is a brand new thing we just made up and now we're calling it a math learning disability, but it's not new. It's just new to us. And I think that's an important difference. And you might know, you probably have already seen this with your child, that anything neurodivergent, dyslexia, dyscalculia, dysgraphia, Tourette's, ADHD, autism spectrum, there's a lot of crossover. And it's almost like I see these individual neurodivergent pieces like a watercolor, and then they have places where they blend. So that's a really interesting thing to see in people who are neurodivergent, which for the quick definition is just a different way of thinking, different brain wiring, not a deficiency, just a difference. And what you see with the difference between math and dyslexia, there's a couple of key ones. The one is the area in the brain where they both happen. I won't go too far down the neurology rabbit hole, although I love talking about the brain. But those happen in different parts of the brain and they express differently. So the reading piece that we're very familiar with is students struggling with letters, struggling with reading fluency, and then later struggling to get conceptual understanding from printed text. It doesn't create the same mental images that it would for a person who's not dyslexic. What we see with dyscalculia is just a real uncomfortable space for numbers. What do they mean? What do quantities mean? Time, money, and place value never make any sense. And that fluency we're looking for of doing any kind of mental math, which is a total parlor trick. Please quit holding it up as the gold standard, everyone. But the idea of doing that mental math is near impossible for a lot of people and very intimidating.
I love the watercolor example. In math, I know that a lot of teachers, you mentioned how the two areas grew together, and we've really only focused on the reading side in language arts. Can you break down a little bit for us to understand, if I'm a teacher, what would be some of the early signs of dyscalculia?
Or dyscalculia, dyscalca, people come up with anything. Some of your early signs can happen as young as first and second grade. And of course, at that time, we're still waiting for human development. Everyone progresses at different times. So we don't really start looking for learning disabilities until third or fourth. But what you're going to see is students who are intelligent, sometimes highly, highly intelligent, and we think they should be able to get this stuff quickly. And we teach a lesson on Monday. The student is kind of with us on Tuesday. By Wednesday, they're not sure what we're talking about. And by the Friday test, they don't think they've ever seen this information before. And the other key thing for dyscalculia is we will keep repeating, especially those basic facts, because your brain loses them like water through a colander if you have dyscalculia. But we drill those basic facts and they're just not sticking. Even if the student seems to get them on day one, it's just gone by day 3. And that really impacts their ability to finish assessments the way we want them to and in the amount of time we give them. But you can see it at very young ages.
So in describing this, it sounds a lot like how dyslexia might present with those early spelling tests. Would you say that's a fair description?
Yes. Yes, you will have a student who knows the vocab and they're working on their spelling all week, and then they sit down to take that spelling test, and you think, wow, was that phonetic? Where did that come from? And you're surprised because the assessment does not match what you expect based on capabilities. And that same thing will happen with math.
Great. Yeah, and I knew, one of the problems in math is that, and with a learning disability, is it's a system of failure. So I have to fail in math long enough before you diagnose me, and now I'm frustrated. And is it, now is it attention? Is it behavior? Is it math? And so I'm curious, for your thoughts about, like, my favorite in working in this area is that, fractions, every kid does poorly in fractions. Like it's just part of development. Yet what does that kid look so different? And how might I lower their anxiety, increase their success maybe before they get identified, even though I smell it in second grade or third grade, and yet they haven't failed long enough? What would be some things you might suggest I do to build that bridge to get that kid past everything? Because it's not just fractions they're going to fail at. They're going to fail at everything.
Yeah, Lisa, I have so many tangents I want to go off, but I'm going to try to throw them out quick and get back to answering the question. The first is maybe we'd be better at fractions if we quit trying to squish algebra into 4th grade, but I'll let that one go. And my other one is that, yes, a lot of people do struggle with fractions. So maybe we need to look at that piece and give some extra support to all students. Let them have a multiplication list, not the chart, the old-fashioned times tables in front of them. That way they can look up the numbers you need them to look up for the numeracy piece while they're focusing on the conceptual part or the algorithm part. There's nothing wrong with just following the algorithm. Steps and procedures are how you get it done. And for neurodivergent students, if we can help them get it done, then they're much more interested in having a conceptual conversation with us. But the reverse is not true from my experience. But let's just give them some extra support. I've been making banana bread for probably 30 years or more, and I'm still going to open up the recipe book and just make sure I've got the right amount of flour and the right amount of butter. I'm going to give myself that support because I want my bread to taste good once I've baked it. So I feel like we remove support on our timeline, not on the student's timeline. And that is an easy fix for any teacher. You don't have to buy anything. You don't have to change anything. You don't have to replace your program. Just give a little extra support. Let the student move away from it as they are comfortable.
And I love that. I love your analogy, and also this focus on, when things are appropriate. And along those lines, I know that you have examined before this idea of the importance of real-time feedback. Mm-hmm. So can you explain the importance of that feedback and the proximity of the feedback to the actual event so that our audience can understand how this impacts kids?
Oh, yeah, that is such an interesting part about brain research, too. We know that like our brain at all times all day without us being aware of it will make a prediction, and then it wants confirmation. And if we predict something and we are right, we strengthen those neurological connections. And if we predict something and we're wrong, we weaken them. If we get no feedback, right or wrong, then what do we do with those neurons? They just kind of float out there. They're not really coupled with dendrites. That means we're not remembering it and we're not recalling it later. So instant feedback is really helpful. And I think that's another easy thing teachers can do is when you're with the student at a desk and you're letting them do the work, see what's going on, and then just tell them, hey, you added here. I actually want you to multiply at that step. Let's do another one. Good, you multiplied, perfect. And now you can walk away from the desk. But you told them exactly what they did wrong and exactly how to fix it. Now you're strengthening that connection. You're giving them mastery. They can now practice to increase mastery, and they know what you want from them. I think a lot of times we act like math is this big secret, and you either know it or you don't. You're in the club or you're not allowed in the club at all. And honestly, it's just math.
Oh, the famous last words. Somebody who loves math. So, Honora, my final question to you is just a follow-up of what you were just mentioning, and that idea of this feedback. And I so love your explanation of how the brain is a big part of this. Can you give us an example of how a teacher might in flight, arrange a learning setting that gives them a chance to give that immediate feedback? Because I feel like that's, for a lot of teachers, there's such a gap between even, homework and other things. And by the time somebody gives the feedback, so many other thoughts have been run through the mind that's feels long forgot. They no longer associate their performance with the feedback. So in a math class, how can that look on a practical level?
Yeah, that is a great question, Rebecca. And I feel like you're completely correct. The more time that goes by, the less the brain is interested. That was yesterday or 2 days ago, and it has no relevance. So that later feedback is not going to create the same kind of prediction response that we really want. And I do think that for teachers and 20-year classroom teacher, I completely get the struggles of managing the entire class. I think we would get farther faster if we would just talk to children, and we really don't. We really don't. If we could just say to people, okay, we're going to go over the homework. Maybe we could quit assigning homework. We have no intention of grading fully and let go of those completion grades. But there's another soapbox I will leave to the side. To say to people, okay, who added here when they should have subtracted? All right, just, hands up. Yeah, that one is common. Okay, this is how you know you're going to have to subtract in this thing. And then you are really addressing it with the whole group and not sending any one individual student out for that exposure in front of their peers. Another way you could do it in the classroom is just take those few kids who keep having problems with a certain topic or assessment, and either in a small group or individual setting, analyze their work with them and say, okay, I noticed right here you wrote out this step, but take a look at I'll use fractions. Take a look at your denominators. They're not the same number. And as you say that, circle the denominators at the bottom. So you're really coding the vocab, the placement in the fraction, and the visual of what the student is looking at, so they really know what you're talking about. And then just point that out to them, what they need to do differently. But it doesn't have to be very long. It doesn't have to be intensive. It can be very casual. And the more we make it casual and friendly, the more we're addressing the social emotional piece, because the trauma that's involved in low math performance is real, valid, and sustained.
And so my last question is going to talk about that trauma being cyclical in some cases. So, mom or dad, kid comes home and has math to do, and you'll hear, oh, I'm not a math person. Or my favorite was a true example where someone said, look, when I grew up, 6 times 6 was just 36. Why it was, I don't know, and I don't care, and I don't know why my kid has to write that. And so math has changed. Math anxiety, we know, is, I think, 72% of the population is assessed with some level of math anxiety if you look at the research. So what do you do to help families understand, especially kids who have a disability in math, to get them to practice and understand the importance of doing some skill work over the summer, on the weekends, on the car ride? How do you kind of coach people to go in that direction in the work that you do?
When I'm working with a student directly, I will tell parents, you will save a lot of money if you don't help. You will need me less if you quit helping, because then I don't have to fix, the extra issues that can come in from some very well-meaning parents who want to help. And I do want parents to be involved. Personally, especially when it comes to summertime and that idea of skill building, I want everybody to take a step back. I want everybody to relax a little bit. And I'd rather you just had some fun as a family. That's going to go a lot farther than any workbook you're going to do or drilling any of those facts. And you can put math into a lot of things. And it doesn't all have to be the numeracy piece, especially because for dyscalculia, steps and procedures can be difficult. So a lot of people with dyscalculia don't like board games. They can't really keep up with all the rules they have to follow. And then it's intimidating and it's a negative experience. And then their parents are mad because they couldn't play the game very well. And we're not getting where we want to get to from there. But we can talk about math and music. And it doesn't have to be did you know that math is involved? Nobody has ever wanted to hear that from a parent ever. Just listen to some different types of music and talk about the tempo being fast or slow. And then the student has that prior knowledge when it does come up in a classroom discussion of fractions, their brain will make the connection on its own. Make some puzzles together, play some low-key games as a family. And make it tactile, make it something you actually sit down together and play blackjack, play go fish, play something that's very seemingly basic because we don't have to build the entire Coliseum. We just need to build a little bit of a foundation. And really that foundation should have the strong, positive, emotional piece. That's going to get your kids through later math classes.
Great. I love it. Well, thank you for such wonderful, practical, brain focused, list goes on and on, extraordinary information for our listeners. And if you have questions, please send us a tweet at Access Practical or post a question for us on our Facebook page at Practical Access. Thank you again, Nora. Some really great advice for families and teachers. Thanks.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.